Wow, we're diving into some really heavy stuff today.
Yeah. Oh,
Recent plane crash in Washington D.C. Obviously a total tragedy,
absolutely.
but it's what's really captured everyone's attention, I think, is how former President Trump has reacted to it.
Mm.
We've got a couple main sources for this deep dive. We have the initial news report on the crash itself,
Right.
and then we also have quite a collection of Trump's statements and interviews and social media posts and all that.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is how quickly everything shifts from the event
Right.
to the political reaction to it, almost like the crash itself becomes a springboard for
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
pre-existing agendas and grievances.
Exactly. So what we want to do today is kind of unpack all of this.
Right.
First, we have to understand what we know about the crash itself.
Right.
Then we're going to look into Trump's response and what makes it so controversial.
Right.
And then finally kind of zoom out a little bit and ask ourselves, what does all of this tell us about how we deal with disasters, especially in this crazy hyper-partisan
Yeah.
climate?
And we can't forget about the human cost of this. I mean, 67 people
Oh my God.
lost their lives.
Yeah.
Members of the U.S. figure skating team were on board.
Wow.
Some Russian athletes and coaches. Just
Yeah.
imagine the families
Yeah.
and the ripple effect of that loss.
It's unbelievable. Absolutely. It's like a reminder that behind all the headlines and all the political back and forth,
Yeah.
there are real people who are really suffering. So let's start with the facts. This wasn't just some minor incident. This was a passenger plane colliding
Right.
midair with an Army helicopter right over the Potomac River.
And when you think about all the airspace above a major city
Oh, yeah.
in D.C.
Yeah.
and all the layers of control involved, you really have to stop and ask yourself, how could something like this even happen?
It's a great question. It's like your mind immediately jumps to
Right.
pilot error or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
something going wrong in the control tower.
Yeah.
But it's rarely ever that simple, is it?
No, not really.
Yeah.
Especially with accidents involving these modern aircraft. I mean, these planes are designed with so many redundant systems,
Yeah,
so many fail-safes built in.
right.
So when something catastrophic like this does happen, investigators are looking for what's called the chain of events.
Okay, so unpack that for me. The chain of events.
Okay, so imagine like dominoes.
Okay.
One thing goes wrong, and it just sets off this whole cascade that leads to the final disaster.
Right.
So it could be a tiny little mechanical issue
Right.
that just snowballs out of control, or maybe a miscommunication
Yeah.
between the pilot and air traffic control that just gets compounded under stress.
So you're saying it's usually multiple factors, not just
Right.
one big mistake.
Almost always.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing for investigators is figuring out which domino started the chain.
Oh.
And was it a human error, technical failure, bad weather, or some combination?
Yeah.
That's why these investigations take time.
Yeah.
They're incredibly complex and meticulous.
Which makes Trump's reaction all the more jarring.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is a guy who's known for shooting from the hip.
Oh, sure.
But even for him, this seems extreme. Like he holds this press conference
I know.
while they're literally still pulling bodies from the Potomac.
It's unbelievable. And he doesn't just hold the press conference.
Yeah.
He immediately starts offering up what he calls very strong opinions
Yeah.
on the cause of the crash.
Oh, gosh.
And this is where alarm bells start ringing for anyone who understands these aviation accident investigations.
Because you're not supposed to speculate publicly, right?
Right. Especially not someone with a platform
Right.
and influence like his.
Exactly.
There's an internationally agreed upon process for these investigations, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Premature speculation can taint the whole investigation,
Sure.
influence witness testimony, even put pressure on investigators
Wow.
to find a certain outcome that they want.
And in Trump's case, it wasn't just like vague speculation. He pointed fingers directly.
Directly.
Blamed the helicopter pilot. Said air traffic controllers need to
yeah.
be geniuses, not regular people. I mean, that must send chills down the spines
Absolutely.
of aviation professionals everywhere.
Yeah, one of our sources, aviation expert Graham Braithwaite,
Okay.
called it out right away. He warned that this kind of talk creates what he called a culture of fear.
Okay, wait, what does that mean? Culture of fear. Like, paint a picture.
Okay, so imagine you're an air traffic controller. You're making hundreds of decisions a day.
Yeah,
Lives depend on your focus.
right.
Now imagine knowing that if something goes wrong, even as a complex chain of events, that the former president might publicly blame you before the investigation even begins.
That's going to add an insane amount of pressure
Oh, absolutely.
to an already stressful job.
Absolutely. And that pressure can lead to mistakes.
Right.
It can lead to people being afraid to report near misses or potential safety concerns.
Wow.
It creates this climate where people prioritize covering their own backs
Right.
instead of focusing on safety.
So even if Trump's theories about the crash turn out to be wrong,
Right.
the very act of, like, throwing them out there could be detrimental
Absolutely.
to aviation safety in the long run.
That's exactly what people are afraid of.
Wow.
It undermines trust, discourages transparency, and it replaces this careful,
Right.
evidence-based approach
Right.
with just gut reactions and blame, and that's incredibly dangerous in
Yeah.
an industry where safety is paramount.
And then Trump takes it a step further, doesn't he?
He does.
He goes after the FAA's diversity initiatives.
Yeah, and this is where things take a really disturbing turn, and we're going to get into that in detail after a quick hit.
It's wild to me how this went from a tragic accident to talking about diversity in the FAA. Like, what does that even have to do with a helicopter and a plane hitting each other?
Well, and that's what so many people are saying. It doesn't. And that's what's so alarming about Trump's comments.
Right.
Instead of focusing on the complexities of the investigation,
Right.
he uses this tragedy to just push an agenda.
So walk me through it. What exactly did he say about the FAA and diversity?
He specifically called out the FAA for what he called a focus on recruiting people with disabilities.
Hmm.
And he implied that this emphasis on inclusion somehow compromises safety.
Which is a pretty bold claim to make, especially without any evidence.
Exactly, and that's where the danger is.
Right.
These comments just tap into these deeply ingrained biases
Right.
and stereotypes about people with disabilities. It suggests they're somehow less competent or capable.
Yeah.
And that couldn't be further from the truth.
And you have to think about the impact this has on people who are working in aviation.
Of course.
I mean, how demoralizing would it be if you're a skilled pilot or air traffic controller
right.
and you have a disability and you hear the former president basically questioning your competence?
It sends such a chilling message, not only to the people currently working in the field,
Yeah.
but also to future generations who might be thinking about a career in aviation.
Right.
It reinforces the idea that certain groups aren't welcome and that their contributions aren't valued.
It's almost like he's like setting back the clock
Yeah.
on decades of progress toward creating a more inclusive and
Right.
diverse workforce.
And it's not just about fairness or representation.
Yeah.
Those are obviously crucial. It's about recognizing that a diverse workforce brings so much more to the table.
Yeah.
They have a wider range of perspectives and experiences and problem-solving skills, which can actually enhance safety and innovation.
So by pushing this idea that diversity weakens the FAA, he's actually
Right.
potentially undermining the very thing he claims to care about. Safety.
Exactly. And it's especially ironic considering his own administration's record on aviation safety.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, Buttigieg, the transportation secretary,
Right.
pointed out that one of Trump's first acts as president was to fire or suspend key personnel involved in aviation safety.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a huge deal.
It was.
So to turn around and criticize these diversity initiatives
Right.
while just completely overlooking what his administration did just seems so hypocritical.
It really does. It makes you wonder, is he actually concerned about safety?
Yeah.
Or is he just using this tragedy as a platform to push his agenda and attack his opponents?
It's like he saw this crash and thought, perfect opportunity to
Yeah.
just bring up all these old grievances and score some political points.
And that's the really disheartening reality here.
Yeah.
Even tragedies like this, events that should bring people together,
Right.
are just exploited for political gain.
It's unbelievable.
It's a stark illustration of how politicized everything is.
It really is. Which leads to a bigger question. How do we even have a productive conversation about something like aviation safety
Right.
when every single issue gets filtered through this red versus blue lens?
That's the real challenge. And it's not just about aviation safety. It's everything.
Yeah.
It requires a conscious effort to step back
Right.
from those biases and to engage with the information in a more nuanced way.
So it's not about pretending we don't have opinions or beliefs. Right.
But about acknowledging that maybe our
Exactly.
first reactions are colored by our political leanings and just being open
Just
to other perspectives.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that things are complex.
Yeah.
There are rarely easy answers. And the truth often lies somewhere in between those opposing extremes.
Yeah, but that feels so hard in our current climate.
It is.
It's like everyone's shouting their opinions and no one's listening.
And that's exactly why it's so important to break out of those echo chambers.
Right.
To actively seek out different perspectives and talk to people who hold different views.
It's about being willing to challenge our own assumptions
Yeah, absolutely.
and being open to the fact that we might not always be right.
Exactly. And sometimes the most valuable insights come from the people who see things differently than we do.
It's about understanding that we all have blind spots
Right.
and that by listening to each other, we can understand the world better and get closer to the truth.
Well said. And this applies not just to aviation safety or politics. Yeah,
But to every part of our lives.
I agree.
It's about being curious, having empathy, and wanting to learn from each other.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the most important thing is don't let all the noise drown out the signal.
That's good.
Be critical of what you read and hear, seek out diverse perspectives, and don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions.
Because truth and understanding are worth fighting for.
They are.
Even or maybe especially when the world feels like it's designed to keep us divided.
Well said. And remember, there's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to discuss.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. You know, it's crazy how this plane crash, I mean, like, obviously a horrifying thing, almost becomes secondary to all the politics around it.
It really does.
Makes you wonder if we can even grieve as a country anymore
Right.
without it turning into just pointing fingers at each other.
I think a lot of people are asking that same question. This urge to assign blame, like we need a scapegoat,
Right.
it just overrides everything else. And especially when you have people like Trump
Yeah.
just fueling the fire.
And it's not even the first time we've seen this.
No.
I mean, think about any major disaster. A hurricane, a mass shooting, a terrorist attack. It doesn't matter.
It's the same thing every time.
It's always the same.
Yeah, the political vultures are always just circling, waiting to pick apart the carcass
Oh, gosh. It's a
for their own gain.
They're capitalizing on people's pain,
Yeah,
their need for answers,
Yeah.
the desire for someone to blame.
and that's the danger.
Yeah.
When we get so caught up in the emotions, we don't think as clearly.
Right.
We aren't as critical of what we're hearing and seeing.
We just want someone to blame.
Yeah, we fall for conspiracy theories and easy explanations that
Right.
just confirm what we already believe.
So how do we break out of this? How do we even start to have these tough conversations?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a perfect answer.
Yeah. Right.
But I think it starts with just recognizing our own biases,
Okay.
realizing we all come at this with our own baggage
Right.
and preconceived ideas.
It's about that self-awareness, being able to say to yourself,
Right.
okay, maybe I'm letting my political views cloud my judgment here. Let me take a step back
Exactly.
and actually listen to what other people are saying.
And listening isn't just about hearing the words.
Right.
It's about trying to understand where those opinions come from.
Yeah.
What are the underlying emotions, the fears,
Right.
the experiences that shape how people see the world?
It's about empathy, right? Putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Exactly. Empathy is so important, and I think we're losing it.
As a society.
Yeah, we're so stuck in our own bubbles, so convinced that we're right,
Right.
that we forget how to connect with people who see things differently.
And that just creates this perfect storm for misinformation and
Right.
conspiracy theories.
Because when we turn the other side into the enemy, when we say they're bad or stupid,
Right.
we shut down any chance of finding common ground.
It all boils down to that, doesn't it? This crash, Trump's reaction, the whole debate,
Yeah,
it's all just a symptom of this bigger problem.
it
This
is.
inability to just talk to each other like human beings.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together,
Yes.
that we all share this planet and we all want a better future.
And that maybe, just maybe, if we actually listen to each other,
Okay.
we could start to heal these divisions.
Then build a better world,
A more compassionate world.
and a safer one.
Yeah, well said. I think that's a message worth holding on to,
For sure.
even when things feel dark and divided.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good place to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone,
Thanks for having me.
and keep those conversations going.
Yes, keep asking questions.
Keeps learning.
Keep seeking understanding.
Thanks for listening.